She had to see for herself. She grabbed her keys, her heart pounding a frantic rhythm against her ribs. She didn't call a cab, she ran. The cold night air whipped against her face, a brutal contrast to the warmth of her abandoned dinner. Her feet pounded on the pavement, each step a desperate plea for the truth to be anything but what she suspected. As Evelyn's affection for Alexander grew, she felt a pang of guilt. This was a business arrangement, a marriage of convenience. She was not supposed to fall for the most powerful man in the city, but how could she not? He was a man of quiet strength, a man who saw past her public facade and saw the real her. Leo's apartment building loomed ahead, a stark, modern glass structure. She knew the doorman, a kind old man named Mr. Henderson, who always greeted her with a warm smile. But tonight, she avoided his gaze, her face a mask of determination. She took the elevator up to the 12th floor. The doors slid open, and a wave of music and laughter spilled out into the hallway. The sound was a physical blow, a mocking echo of the silent, lonely evening she had spent. Meanwhile, Victoria and Leo's relationship continued to spiral downward. The constant pressure of their failed schemes and their deep-seated jealousy of Evelyn's new life had poisoned their bond. Leo, now demoted at Sterling Industries, blamed Victoria for their misfortune. "You promised me a life of luxury. Victoria," he would yell. "You said you could give me what Evelyn couldn't. Look at us now. We're living in this tiny apartment, while Evelyn is living like a queen." She stood outside Leo's door, her hand hovering over the bell, but she didn't ring it. She couldn't. Instead, she slowly pushed the door, which was ajar. The scene inside was a perfect, sickening picture. Leo, her fiancé, was laughing, his arm around her sister Victoria's waist. They were sharing a bottle of wine, the same vintage Evelyn had bought for their anniversary. Victoria was perched on his lap, her hair a wild, tangled mess, a triumphant smirk on her face. Her eyes met Evelyn's, and the smirk widened. Victoria, in turn, blamed Leo for his weakness. "You should have kept her." Leo, "You're a fool. You let the best thing you ever had get away." The world seemed to spin. The music, the laughter, the flickering candlelight, it all faded into a dull, echoing roar. Evelyn felt nothing but a hollow emptiness, a chasm of pain so profound it stole her breath. She didn't cry. The tears simply wouldn't come. She just stood there, watching the two people she had loved the most. Their betrayal laid bare. Their arguments were bitter. Their love a hollow echo of the past. Their jealousy festered, turning into a venomous hatred for Evelyn. They were a pathetic pair, consumed by their own greed and envy. Their prize was a life of misery, a stark contrast to the quiet happiness Evelyn was beginning to find. Leo's laughter died on his lips. His eyes widened in panic as he saw her. He pushed Victoria off his lap, scrambling to his feet. "Evelyn, it's not what it looks like. I swear," he stammered, his face a pathetic mask of guilt and fear. The apathetic silence of the Sterling mansion was slowly filling with life, with love, with hope. Evelyn was no longer a prisoner in a gilded cage. She was a woman who was slowly, surely, falling in love with her husband. And Alexander Sterling, the most powerful man in the city, was, in his own quiet way, falling for her too. The stage was set for a new chapter, a new set of challenges, and a new, more profound kind of love. The tenuous peace in the Sterling mansion was a fragile thing, built on quiet moments and unspoken affections. Evelyn found herself in a state of cautious happiness, a feeling she hadn't known she could possess. Alexander's silent gestures of care had chipped away at her emotional walls, and she was beginning to see her marriage not as a contract, but as a genuine, if unconventional, partnership. Oliver, the scruffy terrier mix, had become the unofficial mascot of their budding family, a furry bridge between a lonely woman and a powerful, reserved man. Victoria, however, remained calm. She sauntered over to Evelyn, a glint of pure malice in her eyes. "Oh, sister, don't be so dramatic. He was getting cold feet. He's mine now." The tranquility, however, was about to be shattered. The silence that had once defined Evelyn's life was now a breeding ground for another's malevolence. Victoria and Leo, their lives in free fall, had become consumed by their failure and Evelyn's success. The venom of their jealousy had festered, transforming into a desperate, malicious plan to reclaim what they believed was rightfully theirs. The words, sharp and venomous, finally broke through Evelyn's shock. But instead of the angry outburst she had expected from herself, a strange sense of clarity washed over her. She looked at Leo, a man who couldn't even stand by her on their anniversary, and then at her sister, a woman so starved for attention and validation she would steal her own sister's happiness. They deserved each other. They were two sides of the same counterfeit coin. One afternoon, Evelyn received a cryptic email from an unknown sender. The subject line read, "A warning." Inside, a single line of text, "Watch your husband." She dismissed it as a prank, a cruel joke from a random troll. But then a second email arrived, and a third. The messages became more specific, referencing Alexander's late nights and business trips. They painted a picture of a man who was using his business to hide a secret life of infidelity. Evelyn's heart, which had just begun to heal, felt a sharp, familiar pang of doubt. Could he truly be different from Leo? Was this just another gilded cage, another lie? A slow, deliberate smile crept across Evelyn's face. It wasn't a happy smile, but one of bitter resolve. She looked Leo straight in the eye. "You're right, Leo," she said, her voice steady and calm. "It's not what it looks like. It's worse. It's pathetic." She turned to Victoria. "You can have him, Victoria. I hope you enjoy your prize. It comes with a lot of baggage and very little honor." Meanwhile, Victoria and Leo, now a pathetic team of schemers, were executing their plan. They had paid a private investigator to dig up dirt on Alexander, but the man was a ghost, an impenetrable fortress. Desperate, they turned their attention to Evelyn. They knew she was the key to Alexander's downfall, and they were determined to use her to destroy him. Then, a moment of pure, raw strength. Evelyn reached for the ring on her finger, the engagement ring Leo had given her. She slipped it off, its cold metal a painful reminder of a broken promise. She held it out to Victoria. "Here," she said, her voice a low, dangerous whisper. "You can have this too. It's a fitting symbol for the life you've chosen." Their scheme was simple and sinister. They planted fake evidence, photoshopped images of Evelyn with a man who bore a striking resemblance to a prominent business rival of Alexander's. They forged a series of emails, meticulously crafted to look like a clandestine correspondence between Evelyn and this man. Their goal was to create a convincing narrative of an affair, to plant the seed of doubt in Alexander's mind, and to destroy the trust that was so slowly and carefully being built between them. Victoria's smug expression faltered for a moment, replaced by a flicker of shock. Leo stood there, stunned into silence. Evelyn didn't wait for a response. She turned her back on them both, her head held high. With each step she took, the gilded cage of her old life fell away. She was no longer Evelyn, the soon-to-be Mrs. Anderson. She was just Evelyn, a woman who had been betrayed, but not broken. One evening, as Alexander was leaving for a business trip, he found a small, unmarked USB drive on his desk. He plugged it into his computer, his face a mask of cold curiosity. The drive contained the doctored images and forged emails, a perfect storm of lies designed to ignite a fire of jealousy and rage. His eyes, usually so impassive, hardened into chips of ice as he read the fabricated correspondence. The scent of roasted rosemary and garlic filled the small, impeccably clean apartment. Evelyn carefully placed 2 crystal glasses on the table. The wine already breathing, a deep ruby red promising a night of celebration. Tonight was her 5-year anniversary with Leo. 5 years of building a life together, of dreaming, of working tirelessly to turn their modest apartment into a home. The table was set with the simple elegance she had spent all day perfecting. Candles flickered, casting a warm, gentle glow. She wore the navy blue dress Leo had complimented on their first date, a sentimental tribute to their beginning. She smiled at her reflection in the dark window pane, a hopeful, radiant smile. Evelyn, unaware of the trap that was being sprung, spent the evening with Oliver, her heart a tangled mess of confusion and fear. She had received a final, more threatening email from the anonymous sender, a message so venomous it left her shaken. "You're not so special, Evelyn. You're just a replacement. He's with someone else, and soon, you'll be nothing again." She walked out of the apartment, down the hallway, and into the elevator without looking back. As the doors closed, she finally let the tears fall, hot and silent. The pain was immense, a gaping wound, But underneath it, a new feeling was taking root. A fierce, burning resolve. She had given away the scumbag. She was free. And now, the real story of her life would begin. The scent of roasted rosemary and garlic filled the small, impeccably clean apartment. Evelyn carefully placed 2 crystal glasses on the table, the wine already breathing. A deep ruby red promising a night of celebration. Tonight was her 5-year anniversary with Leo. 5 years of building a life together, of dreaming, of working tirelessly to turn their modest apartment into a home. The table was set with a simple elegance she had spent all day perfecting. Candles flickered, casting a warm, gentle glow. She wore the navy blue dress Leo had complimented on their first date, a sentimental tribute to their beginning. She smiled at her reflection in the dark window pane, a hopeful, radiant smile. The silence of the mansion, once a comfort, now felt like a suffocating blanket. She waited for Alexander to call, to tell her he was safe, but the phone remained silent. The doubt, the fear, the old wounds of betrayal all came rushing back, a tidal wave of emotion that threatened to drown her. She was a woman who had been betrayed once, and now she was terrified it was happening again. Leo had been late, an hour, to be precise. Her smile began to waver, a knot of unease tightening in her stomach. He was a corporate man, a rising star at Sterling Industries, and his job demanded long hours. But their anniversary was sacred. He had promised to be home by 6. She checked her phone for the 10th time. No calls, no messages. He's probably just stuck in a meeting, she murmured to herself, trying to believe it. She poured herself a small glass of wine, the fragrant scent doing little to calm her nerves. But she didn't know the full story. She didn't know that Alexander Sterling was not a man to be fooled. He was a man who saw everything. He had received the USB drive, and he had seen through the deception instantly. The doctored images were amateurish, the forged emails full of grammatical errors that no one of Evelyn's education would make. He knew this was a setup, a cruel, desperate attempt by his enemies to get to him through his wife. The only thing he didn't know was who was behind it. As the clock ticked past 8, the anxiety turned into a sharp, bitter feeling. The perfectly cooked steak, now cooling under a foil cover, felt like a symbol of her growing disappointment. She tried calling him again. The phone rang twice before a familiar, syrupy, sweet voice answered. He sat in his private jet, the USB drive in his hand, his expression one of cold, controlled fury. His enemies had made a fatal mistake. They had underestimated him, but more importantly, they had underestimated Evelyn. They had dared to touch his wife, the woman who was slowly, surely, becoming his everything. He would not let this stand. He would find out who was behind this, and he would make them pay. He would not just protect Evelyn, he would destroy the people who dared to hurt her. The stage was set for the ultimate showdown, and this time, there would be no mercy. The silence of the mansion was no longer a symbol of tranquility. It was a vast, echoing abyss of dread. The anonymous emails had done their job, planting seeds of doubt that took root in the fertile soil of Evelyn's past trauma. Every time the phone remained silent, every hour that passed without a word from Alexander, the phantom pain of Leo's betrayal flared anew. She paced the length of her suite, the opulent furniture and priceless art doing nothing to soothe her fractured nerves. Oliver, sensing her distress, whined softly and nudged her hand, his warm, wet nose a small comfort in a world gone cold. "Hello, it's happening again. Oliver," she whispered, her voice raw with unspilled tears. "I was a fool to think it could be different." It was Victoria, her younger sister. Evelyn's heart dropped to her stomach. The voice was breathy, almost a whisper. "Victoria, is everything okay? Why do you have Leo's phone?" She was waiting for the inevitable phone call, the cold, distant voice telling her the business deal was off, that the charade was over. Or worse, she was waiting for a confrontation, a replay of that awful night in Leo's apartment, with her dignity stripped away and her heart broken all over again. Her fear was not of being poor or alone. It was of being proven right about the inherent cruelty of the world. She had chosen to believe in Alexander's quiet care, and now the universe seemed to be laughing at her naivete. "Oh, Evelyn! What a surprise!" Victoria's voice was filled with a false cheerfulness that set Evelyn's teeth on edge. "Leo, he left his phone at my place. We were just..." Catching up. The words catching up hung in the air, dripping with a hidden meaning Evelyn's mind was too kind to comprehend. But the confrontation, when it came, was nothing like she had imagined. A little after midnight, she heard the front door open and close with a familiar, decisive thud. Heavy footsteps echoed down the hallway. Not the quiet, measured pace of Mr. Finch, but the purposeful stride of the master of the house. Evelyn's heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic drumbeat of terror. She braced herself for the worst. Catching up. Why would he be at your place? It's our anniversary. Victoria, you know that. Evelyn's voice was now trembling, a fragile fortress against the assault of doubt. Alexander stood in her doorway, his suit immaculate but his tie loosened, a sign of his haste. His face was not a mask of indifference or anger, but of something far more unsettling cold, controlled fury. It wasn't directed at her, but at the world. In his hand, he held the small, unmarked USB drive. Evelyn, just calm down. It's not what you think. Victoria's voice had lost its fake cheer and was now edged with a cold superiority. We'll talk later. Then, the line went dead. Evelyn, he said, his voice a low, dangerous rumble. He didn't ask if she was okay. He didn't say he was sorry for the lack of communication. He simply walked into the room, his eyes scanning her face with an intensity that made her feel as though he could see straight into her soul. Did you receive messages from an anonymous sender? A cold dread, unlike anything she had ever felt, washed over Evelyn. Her hands began to shake uncontrollably. She knew. Deep down, she knew. The subtle glances, the late-night text, the times Leo had conveniently forgotten his phone, all the little red flags she had chosen to ignore, dismissing them as paranoia, now stood in a line, waving furiously. Evelyn, caught completely off guard, could only nod. She had to see for herself. She grabbed her keys, her heart pounding a frantic rhythm against her ribs. She didn't call a cab, she ran. The cold night air whipped against her face, a brutal contrast to the warmth of her abandoned dinner. Her feet pounded on the pavement, each step a desperate plea for the truth to be anything but what she suspected. Did they accuse me of infidelity? He pressed, his gaze unyielding. Leo's apartment building loomed ahead, a stark, modern glass structure. She knew the doorman, a kind old man named Mr. Henderson, who always greeted her with a warm smile. But tonight, she avoided his gaze, her face a mask of determination. She took the elevator up to the 12th floor. The doors slid open, and a wave of music and laughter spilled out into the hallway. The sound was a physical blow, a mocking echo of the silent, lonely evening she had spent. Another nod. The terror in her heart was a physical ache. This was it. He was going to end their marriage. She stood outside Leo's door, her hand hovering over the bell. But she didn't ring it. She couldn't. Instead, she slowly pushed the door, which was ajar. The scene inside was a perfect, sickening picture. Leo, her fiancé, was laughing, his arm around her sister Victoria's waist. They were sharing a bottle of wine, the same vintage Evelyn had bought for their anniversary. Victoria was perched on his lap, her hair a wild, tangled mess, a triumphant smirk on her face. Her eyes met Evelyn's, and the smirk widened. Good, he said, a word that made no sense in this context. And did they make you doubt me? The world seemed to spin, the music, the laughter, the flickering candlelight. It all faded into a dull, echoing roar. Evelyn felt nothing but a hollow emptiness, a chasm of pain so profound it stole her breath. She didn't cry. The tears simply wouldn't come. She just stood there, watching the two people she had loved the most. Their betrayal laid bare. Tears finally welled in Evelyn's eyes, hot and silent. I don't know, she choked out, the lie sticking in her throat. I'm sorry, Alexander, I didn't mean to. Leo's laughter died on his lips. His eyes widened in panic as he saw her. He pushed Victoria off his lap, scrambling to his feet. Evelyn, it's not what it looks like. I swear, he stammered, his face a pathetic mask of guilt and fear. He cut her off, his voice softening slightly, a barely perceptible shift in tone that was, to her, an ocean of change. Don't apologize. You have every right to be afraid. You have every right to doubt. You have every right to believe that every man is a liar. He walked over to her, closing the distance between them, his presence an overwhelming force. But not all men are Leo, and not all relationships are a transaction. Victoria, however, remained calm. She sauntered over to Evelyn, a glint of pure malice in her eyes. "Oh, sister, don't be so dramatic." He was getting cold feet. "He's mine now." He held out the USB drive. "I received this evening. It contains photoshopped images and forged emails, all designed to make me believe you were having an affair. They are amateurish. The grammar is terrible. It was a pathetic, desperate attempt to create a rift between us. I have already traced the IP addresses. They are Victoria's and Leo's." The words, sharp and venomous, finally broke through Evelyn's shock. But instead of the angry outburst she had expected from herself, a strange sense of clarity washed over her. She looked at Leo, a man who couldn't even stand by her on their anniversary, and then at her sister, a woman so starved for attention and validation she would steal her own sister's happiness. They deserved each other. They were two sides of the same counterfeit coin. Evelyn gasped, the breath rushing out of her lungs in a painful, disbelieving hiss. "No! No! It can't be." A slow, deliberate smile crept across Evelyn's face. It wasn't a happy smile, but one of bitter resolve. She looked Leo straight in the eye. "You're right, Leo," she said, her voice steady and calm. "It's not what it looks like. It's worse. It's pathetic." She turned to Victoria. "You can have him, Victoria. I hope you enjoy your prize. It comes with a lot of baggage and very little honor." "It is," Alexander confirmed, his voice now devoid of all fury, replaced by a quiet, unwavering certainty. "They have been watching you, sending you messages to poison your mind. They have been trying to sabotage me through you. They underestimated me, but more importantly, they underestimated you." Then, a moment of pure, raw strength. Evelyn reached for the ring on her finger, the engagement ring Leo had given her. She slipped it off, its cold metal a painful reminder of a broken promise. She held it out to Victoria. "Here," she said, her voice a low, dangerous whisper. "You can have this too. It's a fitting symbol for the life you've chosen." He looked at her then, and for the first time, Evelyn saw the real man behind the impenetrable facade. The cold, stormy eyes held a warmth that took her breath away. It was a depth of feeling she had only ever dreamed of. Victoria's smug expression faltered for a moment, replaced by a flicker of shock. Leo stood there, stunned into silence. Evelyn didn't wait for a response. She turned her back on them both, her head held high. With each step she took, the gilded cage of her old life fell away. She was no longer Evelyn, the soon-to-be Mrs. Anderson. She was just Evelyn, a woman who had been betrayed, but not broken. She walked out of the apartment, down the hallway, and into the elevator without looking back. As the doors closed, she finally let the tears fall, hot and silent. The pain was immense, a gaping wound, but underneath it, a new feeling was taking root, a fierce, burning resolve. She had given away the scumbag. She was free. And now, the real story of her life would begin. Fan 2, A Dangerous Alliance. He took a step closer, his hand reaching out to gently cup her cheek, his touch a shocking, electric warmth. "I didn't marry you for a business deal, Evelyn. I married you because I was captivated by you. I offered a marriage of convenience because I knew you wouldn't trust a man who offered his heart, but I've always wanted to be more than that for you." Evelyn walked. She didn't know where or why. She just walked. The city lights, once a source of comfort and life, now felt like mocking, indifferent eyes. The world was a blur of neon and hurried footsteps, a kaleidoscope of faces that didn't see her. The hot, silent tears had finally stopped, replaced by a dull, throbbing ache in her chest. She had a bag slung over her shoulder, containing nothing but the navy blue dress she wore, her phone, and the cold, empty feeling that was now her constant companion. Her apartment, her home, her life with Leo, it was all a lie, a 5-year lie. The realization was a weight on her shoulders, a burden she couldn't outrun. Evelyn's world, which had been spinning out of control for what felt like an eternity, suddenly stilled. The pain, the fear, the doubt, it all evaporated, replaced by a wave of pure, overwhelming emotion. She saw the truth in his eyes, in the gentle curve of his lips, in the way he was looking at her as if she were the most precious thing in the world. He had seen her at her lowest, and he had been drawn to her strength. He had protected her, not because it was in the contract, but because he genuinely cared. She eventually found herself in a part of the city she didn't recognize, a district of towering glass buildings and sleek, black cars. The air hummed with power and money. She saw a dimly lit bar, a place that reeked of wealth and old leather, and found herself pushing through its heavy doors. She needed a drink, something strong enough to quiet the deafening echo in her mind. A single tear, a tear of relief and profound gratitude, escaped her eye and traced a hot path down her cheek. Alexander, she whispered, the name feeling foreign and yet so right on her tongue. The bartender, a man with a kind, weathered face, looked at her with an expression of gentle concern. He saw the haunted look in her eyes, the slightly disheveled hair, the elegant dress that looked so out of place. "Rough night, miss?" he asked, his voice low. He pulled her into his arms, a slow, deliberate embrace that was all the more powerful for its long-awaikedness. His touch was firm, protective, and unlike any she had ever known. He was a safe harbor in a storm, a fortress she could finally seek shelter in. "Evelyn," he murmured into her hair, his voice thick with an emotion she had never heard him express. "I'm sorry for scaring you. I should have told you sooner. But you are not alone in this fight. We are in this together, and no one is going to hurt you ever again." Evelyn just shook her head, unable to speak. "Whiskey," she managed, her voice a raspy whisper. "Neat." The unspoken words between them had finally been spoken, and in their place, a new reality was taking root. Their marriage was no longer a fragile alliance, but a fierce, protective bond. The caged treasure had found its guardian, and the ruthless tycoon had found his heart. With his arms around her, Evelyn knew with a certainty she had never felt before that this was the end of her sorrow, and the beginning of her true, magnificent life. The stage was set, and this time, Evelyn and Alexander were on the same side, ready to face their enemies and deliver justice. The truth, when finally unveiled, was not a sword that severed their bond, but a forge that fused it. Evelyn's fear was replaced by a fiery resolve, and Alexander's protective instincts were now openly, fiercely focused on her. Their marriage of convenience had become a fortress of genuine affection, built on the shared foundation of her past and his unspoken devotion. With the lies of Victoria and Leo exposed, they were no longer two individuals, but a united front against their common enemies. She sat there, a lone figure in a sea of corporate suits and glamorous, high-heeled women. She nursed her drink, the fiery liquid a brief distraction from her inner turmoil. She felt exposed, vulnerable, a broken thing on display. She saw a man at a table in the corner. He was a force of nature, even from a distance. His presence was palpable. He sat alone, a glass of water untouched before him, his gaze sweeping the room with a cold, almost predatory intensity. He was dressed in a suit so perfectly tailored it looked like a second skin. His face was a chiseled masterpiece of sharp angles and high cheekbones, but his eyes were the color of a stormy sea, and they held an unreadable depth of coldness. He was Alexander Sterling, the CEO of Sterling Industries, the most powerful man in the city. The name Leo had revered, the man he had aspired to be. The next few days were a whirlwind of meticulous planning. Alexander, with Evelyn by his side, initiated a swift and calculated campaign of justice. He didn't want a quiet, behind-the-scenes revenge. He wanted the world to see the truth. He wanted Victoria and Leo's humiliation to be as public and as complete as the one they had tried to inflict on Evelyn. As she watched, a drunken man stumbled towards her, his face flushed with wine and arrogance. "Hey, little lady," he slurred. "Why are you sitting all alone? Don't you know this is a bar for big boys?" He tried to grab her arm. Their first move was to leak the doctored images and forged emails, along with Alexander's swift debunking of them, to a few key journalists. The story broke like a dam, a tidal wave of scandal that washed away the last shreds of Victoria and Leo's reputation. The public, who had once pitied Evelyn and admired Leo, now saw him and Victoria for what they truly were, two desperate, malicious schemers. Evelyn flinched, pulling away instinctively. "Please, just leave me alone," she said, her voice still a fragile whisper. The final blow came at a live, televised press conference. Alexander, with Evelyn standing beside him, her hand linked firmly in his, presented his findings. "My wife, Evelyn Sterling," he began, his voice calm and commanding, has been the target of a vicious smear campaign. The perpetrators are none other than my former associate, Leo Anderson, and his new wife, Victoria. They attempted to use forged evidence to sabotage my company and destroy my marriage. What? A little mouse doesn't have a voice, he sneered, leaning closer. He then projected the fake emails onto a massive screen, pointing out the amateurish grammar mistakes and logical inconsistencies. Then, with a flick of his wrist, he projected the IP address logs, a damning trail leading straight back to Victoria and Leo's apartment. The gasp that swept through the room was audible. The journalists scrambled, their faces a mixture of shock and morbid fascination. Before he could do anything else, a voice cut through the air, cold and sharp as a shard of ice. Let go of her! It was Alexander. His voice wasn't loud, but it commanded attention, silencing the entire bar. Victoria and Leo, watching the press conference on a small, flickering TV in their dingy apartment, were in a state of utter horror. Their faces were ashen, their eyes wide with disbelief. The world was watching as their carefully constructed lies crumbled to dust. Their names, once whispered with a mix of jealousy and admiration, were now a byword for greed and betrayal. They were ostracized, their reputations permanently destroyed. Leo was fired from Sterling Industries, and no other company would touch him. Victoria's social circles, the very thing she had been so desperate to be a part of, now turned their backs on her. They were alone, despised, and utterly ruined. The drunk man turned, his bravado instantly evaporating as he saw Alexander. Sterling, Mr. Sterling. The revenge, Evelyn realized, was not in their downfall, but in her own resilience. She had not only survived their betrayal, she had thrived. She had found a man who saw her worth, a man who loved her not despite her past, but because of it. Alexander's hand tightened around hers, a silent promise of protection and unwavering love. He was not just her husband, he was her partner, her defender, her everything. Alexander rose from his seat, a tower of controlled power and menace. You've had enough, he said, his eyes like daggers. Leave. Now. The drunk man, cowed and trembling, stumbled out of the bar, leaving a trail of shame in his wake. As the press conference ended, Evelyn looked at Alexander, her heart overflowing with a love so profound it brought tears to her eyes. He was the most powerful man in the city, but in that moment, he was just her Alexander. He leaned down and, with a tender kiss on her forehead, whispered, "We are in this together. Always." Evelyn just stared, a silent thank you in her eyes. Alexander walked over to her table, his footsteps making no sound on the plush carpet. He sat down opposite her, his presence a heavy, suffocating weight. The chapter of their betrayal was finally closed, and a new one was just beginning. It was a chapter not of vengeance, but of love, healing, and the triumph of a woman who had been betrayed but was now cherished beyond measure. The press conference was a watershed moment, a public declaration of both justice and a profound, unexpected love. For Evelyn, the world had shifted. She was no longer defined by her past humiliation, but by her future with Alexander. The Coles transactional marriage had given way to a passionate partnership, a sanctuary built on trust, respect, and a love that had blossomed in the most improbable of circumstances. Evelyn, he said, his voice a low, gravelly baritone that sent a shiver down her spine. Leo Anderson's former fiancée, the woman who just publicly gave away a man and an engagement ring. Interesting. In the weeks that followed, Evelyn and Alexander were inseparable. He took her on a private jet to a secluded beach in the Maldives, a place where the sun was warm and the ocean was a crystalline blue. There, under the vast, star-filled sky, Alexander held her close. You are not a caged treasure. Evelyn, he whispered, his voice a low, intimate rumble. You are the true treasure. You are my treasure. He didn't just spoil her with lavish gifts. He spoiled her with his time, his attention, his unwavering love. He learned her every little habit, from the way she drank her morning tea to the way she laughed with her whole heart. He had always seen her worth, and now he was making sure she saw it too. Evelyn's breath hitched. How did he know? Who are you? She asked, her voice barely audible. Evelyn, in turn, found a strength she never knew she possessed. With Alexander's support, she launched her own charity foundation, a nonprofit dedicated to helping women who had been betrayed and abandoned, just like her. She used her platform and her influence not for personal gain, but to empower others. She was no longer a victim, she was a survivor, a leader, a woman who had turned her pain into a purpose. He let out a short, humorless laugh. You should know who I am. Your ex-fiancé worked for me. I am Alexander Sterling, and I believe we have a proposition to discuss. Meanwhile, Victoria and Leo's world had completely collapsed. The public humiliation had been too much to bear. They were broke, despised, and living in squalor, a cruel parody of the luxurious life they had once coveted. Their marriage, built on greed and betrayal, had crumbled into a constant cycle of bitter recriminations and venomous blame. They had lost everything, not just their wealth and status, but their dignity and each other. Their prize had turned out to be nothing more than a hollow, empty shell. He watched her with an unnerving stillness, his eyes never leaving hers. I have a problem. Corporate gossip. The board wants me to settle down, to present a more stable image. Leo Anderson's foolishness has made you a figure of public sympathy, and your public dignity in the face of betrayal. It's a rare quality. It's a quality I can use. Evelyn's life was a testament to the power of resilience and the unexpected nature of destiny. She had given away a scumbag, a man who saw her as a stepping stone. In doing so, she had found her way to the most powerful man in the city, a man who saw her as a partner, a lover, and an equal. She was no longer the heartbroken woman who had walked away from a lie. She was a cherished wife, a compassionate leader, and a woman who had found her happily ever after. Her story was not one of revenge, but of redemption. A beautiful tale of a woman who had lost everything only to find something infinitely more valuable, a love that was true, a purpose that was real, and a happiness that was truly her own. Evelyn's mind reeled. She was being propositioned, not for an affair, but for a business deal, a marriage of convenience. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this story and want to see more, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. Stay with us for the next one, and while you're here, check out our other videos. There's always more to explore. Where are you watching from? Let us know in the comments below. When I saw you that night, Evelyn, he began, his voice a low, intimate whisper that broke through all her defenses. You had every reason to scream, to cry, to break down. You had just been publicly humiliated by the two people you loved the most. But you didn't. You stood there, held your head high, and gave them away with a dignity and grace I have never seen before. It was not the act of a woman in love. It was the act of a woman who valued herself more than a lie. I am offering you a position. My wife. In name only, of course. You will live in my home, have access to my resources. I will protect you from the public and from your family. In return, you will be the respectable, elegant woman I need you to be at corporate events. It's a simple, transactional arrangement. No emotion, no mess, just mutual benefit. Evelyn was speechless. The offer was audacious, shocking, but there was a dark, tempting logic to it. He was offering her not just a way out, but a way up, a way to escape the humiliation and poverty that would surely follow her betrayal. She thought of Victoria, her triumphant smirk. She thought of Leo, his pathetic, guilty face. To walk away, to disappear, was one thing. To re-emerge as the wife of Alexander Sterling. That would be the ultimate act of defiance, a silent, devastating revenge. What would I have to do? She finally asked, her voice stronger now, fueled by a new resolve. Alexander's lips curled into a faint, almost imperceptible smile. You would be my wife, attend galas, sit at my side at dinners, and present a united front to the world. You would have a home, security, a life of comfort. You would never have to worry about anything again. The world would see you as Alexander Sterling's wife, and that alone will be enough to silence your enemies. He leaned forward, his stormy eyes boring into hers. So, what will it be, Evelyn? A life of struggle and shame, or a life of quiet power and security? The choice is yours. Evelyn took a deep breath. She looked down at her hands, still trembling slightly, and saw the empty space where the engagement ring had been. The pain was still there, but now, a new feeling was taking root, a cold, hard ambition. She looked at Alexander, A man who was everything Leo had wanted to be but could never be. A man who was offering her a future she could never have imagined. "I accept," she said, her voice clear and unwavering. Alexander's face remained impassive, but his eyes held a glimmer of something she couldn't quite decipher. He extended a hand across the table, his fingers long and strong. "Welcome to the family, Mrs. Sterling." Evelyn took his hand. His grip was firm, cold, and utterly without emotion. It was a business deal, a dangerous alliance, but as their hands met, Evelyn felt a strange sense of hope. Her old life was gone. Her new one had just begun. The grip of Alexander Sterling's hand was firm, cold, and utterly detached. It was a handshake of a business partner, not a husband. As the bar's heavy doors swung shut behind them, Evelyn felt a finality in the click, as if her old life had just been sealed away in a vault. Outside, a sleek, black limousine idled at the curb, its tinted windows offering a perfect shield from the prying eyes of the world. She slid into the plush leather seat, the scent of new car and money so potent it was almost intoxicating. Alexander sat opposite her, his face a perfect mask of indifference. "The contract is being drafted," he said, his voice cutting through the silence. "It will be a simple prenuptial agreement. You get a monthly allowance. You live in my house. You attend social functions with me. You present a united front to the public. In return, you will have my protection and all the luxuries you desire. I expect absolute discretion and loyalty. There will be no emotional attachments. We are a business partnership." Evelyn just nodded, her mind still reeling. The sheer audacity of his offer, the cold, transactional nature of it, was both terrifying and comforting. There was no room for heartbreak in a business deal. The pain of Leo and Victoria's betrayal still felt like a raw wound, but Alexander's proposition was a bandage of steel, hard and unyielding. The drive was silent, the only sound the hum of the engine and the soft city chatter on the other side of the glass. The car pulled up to a set of massive, wrought iron gates, which swung open to reveal a sprawling estate. The mansion, a modern architectural marvel of glass and steel, rose against the night sky, its lights a cold, unwelcoming beacon. She was no longer just Evelyn. She was now a treasure, a beautiful object to be displayed in a gilded cage. The next few days were a blur of introductions and instructions. She met the staff, a silent army of butlers, maids, and personal assistants, all of whom treated her with a deferential, almost robotic respect. The head butler, a stern-looking man named Mr. Finch, gave her a tour of her new home. It was magnificent. The rooms were vast and filled with priceless art and furniture. Her personal suite was the size of her entire old apartment, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking a manicured garden. But it was also sterile, devoid of any personal touches. It felt less like a home and more like a museum. Alexander kept his distance, communicating with her mostly through Mr. Finch. He was a ghost in his own house, a silent, powerful force that permeated every corner of the estate. He had her wardrobe completely overhauled. A team of stylists and designers descended upon her, transforming her from a simple, elegant woman into a vision of high fashion. She was fitted for gowns, suits, and jewelry, each piece more exquisite than the last. She saw her reflection in the mirror, and the woman staring back at her was a stranger. She was beautiful, yes, but she was also a product, a perfectly crafted image. The first public event was a charity gala for Sterling Industries. It was a baptism by fire. The city's elite, the very people who had whispered and gossiped about her public humiliation, were all there. The moment she stepped out of the car, with Alexander's hand on the small of her back, a wall of camera flashes erupted. He was a rock, an unshakable force, his face betraying no emotion. Evelyn, however, felt a wave of nerves wash over her. But then she saw them. Leo and Victoria were standing in the receiving line, their faces a mixture of shock, confusion, and pure, unadulterated jealousy. Victoria, in a low-cut red dress, had a look of triumph that instantly evaporated, replaced by a ghastly, gaping expression. Leo, standing stiffly beside her, looked like he had seen a ghost. The man who had once been a rising star at Sterling Industries now paled in comparison to the man she was with. Evelyn's heart, which had been a frozen block for days, felt a flicker of warmth, a small, triumphant spark. This was it. This was the revenge. Alexander, ever the master of the situation, led her past them without a single glance. He introduced her to the most powerful people in the room as my wife, Evelyn Sterling, his voice calm and commanding. Her dignity, her quiet strength, was her greatest weapon. She held her head high, smiled politely, and played the part of the perfect, elegant wife. She was no longer the heartbroken woman who had been betrayed. She was a new, powerful Evelyn. The buzz in the room was electric. The gossip, once about her humiliation, was now about her incredible rise to power. As the night wore on, she saw Victoria and Leo again, their faces etched with a bitter envy. Their conversation was strained, their smiles brittle. The man Victoria had stolen, the prize she had so eagerly snatched, now looked like a worthless trinket next to Alexander. The very people who had once pitied Evelyn now saw her as an object of envy. The irony was not lost on her. She had given up a life of modest love for one of immense power, and in doing so, she had completely undone her sister and her former fiancé. "What are you saying?" she asked, her heart pounding a frantic rhythm. Later that evening, as she sat in her opulent suite, surrounded by the spoils of her new life, a cold emptiness settled over her. The revenge was sweet, but it was also hollow. She had won the battle, but at what cost? She was a queen in a castle, but she was also alone. The silence of the mansion was deafening, a stark contrast to the small, loving home she had once had. She was a trophy wife, a beautiful object in a collection. She was a caged treasure. She looked out the window at the city lights, the same lights that had once mocked her. Now, she was on top of them, but she felt no closer to happiness. Leo had been late, an hour, to be precise. Her smile began to waver, a knot of unease tightening in her stomach. He was a corporate man, a rising star at Sterling Industries, and his job demanded long hours. But their anniversary was sacred. He had promised to be home by 6. She checked her phone for the 10th time. No calls, no messages. "He's probably just stuck in a meeting," she murmured to herself, trying to believe it. She poured herself a small glass of wine, the fragrant scent doing little to calm her nerves. Meanwhile, in their own small apartment, Victoria and Leo's relationship was crumbling. The constant pressure and their spiraling jealousy of Evelyn had strained their bond to the breaking point. Leo, whose ambition had driven him to betray Evelyn, now saw his career prospects with Sterling Industries dimming, overshadowed by the very man Evelyn had married. Victoria, whose envy had led her to steal her sister's fiancé, was now faced with the reality that her victory was a hollow one. Her prize was now a frustrated and resentful man, and her sister was living a life of unimaginable luxury and power. As the clock ticked past 8, the anxiety turned into a sharp, bitter feeling. The perfectly cooked steak, now cooling under a foil cover, felt like a symbol of her growing disappointment. She tried calling him again. The phone rang twice before a familiar, syrupy, sweet voice answered. The revenge was complete, but this was only the beginning of a new chapter, one where Evelyn would have to navigate the cold, dangerous waters of her marriage of convenience and find a way to become more than just a caged treasure. The silence of the Sterling mansion was a heavy, constant presence. Evelyn spent her days in a state of suspended animation, a beautiful, lonely ghost in an opulent house. Her marriage was a performance, a carefully choreographed dance for the public. At galas and dinners, she was the epitome of grace and poise, a perfect partner to the ruthless and commanding Alexander Sterling. But behind closed doors, they were strangers, two people bound by a cold, transactional agreement. He was a phantom, and she was a prisoner, albeit a comfortable one. Hello. Yet, subtle changes began to emerge. One evening, after a particularly exhausting charity event, Evelyn found a pot of jasmine tea and a small plate of her favorite Earl Grey shortbreads waiting for her in her suite. She hadn't mentioned her love for them to anyone. It was a small, almost insignificant detail, but it was a crack in the cold, perfect facade of the house. Another time, she awoke with a terrible headache, and Mr. Finch, the stoic butler, appeared with a glass of water and a painkiller, his expression one of quiet concern. "Mr. Sterling instructed me to ensure you were comfortable," he said, his voice a low, gravelly monotone. It was Victoria, her younger sister. Evelyn's heart dropped to her stomach. The voice was breathy, almost a whisper. "Victoria!" Is everything okay? Why do you have Leo's phone? Evelyn's curiosity was piqued. The man who had been a ghost in her life was now a quiet, watchful guardian. She began to observe him more closely. She saw him in the library late at night, a book in his hand, his sharp features softened by the warm glow of a lamp. She noticed the way his eyes would linger on her at public events, a silent, almost imperceptible possessiveness that was not in the contract. Once, while she was sketching in the garden, he appeared, and without a word, handed her a rare imported set of colored pencils. "They are the best for detail," he said, his voice a low rumble. "I noticed you were running low." "Oh, Evelyn, what a surprise!" Victoria's voice was filled with a false cheerfulness that set Evelyn's teeth on edge. "Leo. He left his phone at my place. We were just catching up." The words catching up hung in the air, dripping with a hidden meaning Evelyn's mind was too kind to comprehend. Alexander Sterling was not the ruthless, cold-hearted monster the media portrayed him to be. He was a complex man, a man of power who chose to express care not through grand gestures, but through small, thoughtful actions. He was a man who saw her, not just as a business partner, but as a person. The cold formality of their arrangement was slowly thawing, replaced by a quiet, unspoken understanding. "Catching up. Why would he be at your place? It's our anniversary. Victoria. You know that." Evelyn's voice was now trembling, a fragile fortress against the assault of doubt. One rainy afternoon, Evelyn found a dog outside the mansion gates, shivering and soaked. It was a small, white, scruffy terrier mix with a soulful gaze. "Please, Mr. Finch," she pleaded. "Can we let him in? Just for tonight. Evelyn, just calm down. It's not what you think." Victoria's voice had lost its fake cheer and was now edged with a cold superiority. "We'll talk later." Then, the line went dead. Mr. Finch, for all his sternness, relented. "Mr. Sterling is not fond of animals, ma'am," he warned. A cold dread, unlike anything she had ever felt, washed over Evelyn. Her hands began to shake uncontrollably. She knew. Deep down, she knew. The subtle glances, the late-night text, the times Leo had conveniently forgotten his phone. All the little red flags she had chosen to ignore, dismissing them as paranoia, now stood in a line, waving furiously. But Alexander, when he saw the small and shivering dog, did not object. He simply looked at the dog, then at Evelyn. A flicker of something she couldn't name in his stormy eyes. The dog, whom she named Oliver, became her constant companion, a small beacon of warmth in the vast, cold house. Alexander, to her surprise, would often watch them from a distance, a soft, almost imperceptible smile playing on his lips.